Hello and welcome to Walk the Talk. I'm Shekhar Gupta standing in front of National Parliament, which is in session and where we are complaining all the time that bills are not being passed. But we are so busy complaining about bills that are not being passed that we are completely missing out the story of the bills, in fact laws, which are being repealed. So this may not be a champion parliament in passing new laws, but it's been quite a champion in repealing old laws. And my guest today, Bibek Debroy, is somebody who's instigated this change, who keeps instigating it from behind the scenes. Bibek, welcome to Walk the Talk. I know that we've been trying to set this up for a long time. We have to talk about your work on Mahabharat. We have to talk about your work on the economy. But right now, because this is something going on, and only what is not being done in Parliament gets attention and not what's being done. So give us an idea of what's being done and why.
At the moment, your question is focused on the union government.
Right.
In our country, laws don't always mean union government, they can be state governments also.
Yes, yes.
But your question, the first question was about the union government. When one is talking about old laws are sometimes statutes where the entire statute can be repealed at one go.
The entire law.
The entire law goes at one go. There are also statutes where you need to remove a section, repeal a section.
Or to modernize the law.
Or to modernize the law, to rationalize it, harmonize it. Right. Now the second one is a much more complicated exercise. At the moment, all that has happened is when you can repeal an entire statute, that has been repealed. About...
Sabito, you've gone around with a sword and cut at
that's
whatever
correct.
can be cut
that's
from the
That's
roof.
correct. So about 1,200 odd statutes.
1,200 laws.
In 4 different bills.
And nobody has noticed they've disappeared from the law book.
Well, the Prime Minister mentions it once in a
I
while.
know. I think nobody in
real
life.
No, in real life. No, it doesn't affect us. Now, on the union government, what is important is 2 points. Firstly, this is about 50% of the total statute base that has gone.
So India had about
union
2,500 central laws.
Union government. About half
are gone.
Just gone. The second thing I want to say is that these are things that should have been done in 1947 or 1950.
Right. When Constitution was being framed.
When the Constitution was being framed. But what was done was a very perfunctory exercise in 60-61, a little bit more systematic in 2000-2001. This is the first systematic cleaning
I think
up.
Mr. Vajpayee talked about it for the first time.
Yes, and in 2000-2001, some bit was done, about 250 went.
I think Arun Jaitley also,
yes,
when he was
Arun
Prime
Jaitley.
Minister, yes.
This is the first time the cleaning up has been done on such a large scale.
So give us some examples of laws which have now disappeared and why we will not miss them.
You see, a lot of these, let me be factually correct, a lot of these are appropriation acts which just continue just like that, so for no particular
Many
right.
are ordinances carrying on since 1949.
Ordinance in 1948.
I've read your paper
yes,
on the
that's right.
on your website.
That's right.
Old is not gold.
I have something called the Bengal District Act, which goes back to 1836.
And what does it say?
All it says, it empowers the Bengal presidency and now the West Bengal government to create as many districts as it wants.
But any state can do anyway.
That's right. So why do you need a statute for this?
Right. Yeah, because maybe tomorrow when they did something, somebody will go to court and say, this was not done according to this law.
Fine. But what happens when you do something like this is you go back.
It becomes a nuisance.
No, you check.
Right.
You check whether there are any cases, let's say in the last 50 years, under any of these. And in all of these instances, there will be no cases. But yes, you're right. Why is it important to scrap them? Because they're used for harassment.
You know, because there's a case that I remember from my life as a reporter very vividly.
Yeah.
This is when electronic voting machines were first introduced on experimental basis, I think 1985 or 86, under Rajiv Gandhi's government. And Rajiv had won this massive mandate. So 5 by-elections were held with voting machines. Congress lost all 5. And suddenly the government went to court saying that these elections should be set aside because People's Representation Act describes the ballot as a paper. So a government that brought in technology because it lost elections and it was set aside. and then the law was amended.
Yes.
So you saw
Yes.
the power of a badly worded law which has not kept pace with the time.
You see, I'd react to that by saying that when one is talking about legal reform,
And-
there are many components
And for me,
of
that was a big disappointment with Rajiv, that somebody who promised technology just because he lost elections did this.
See, there are several components. One is getting rid of the old statutes, old sections in statutes. People say, this is not important. It is not important against the entire canvas. In the entire canvas, you also have rationalization issues, you have harmonization issues, you have reducing state intervention, you have modernizing the laws. Now, no one, and the speed of the dispute resolution system, no one is saying that those are being ignored. This is just one component of that jigsaw.
So you talked about this Bengal Act. Tell us about some other laws which have now been completely repealed and nobody will miss them.
Well, from the same year, same vintage, let me give you the example of the Bengal Bonded Warehouse Association.
1836.
Yes. Now, that law said that when it was going to be wound up, the assets had to be given to the East India Company. Now, why do we need that? But the more important point is, you see, old laws exist in other countries also.
Right.
In London, all taxi cabs are governed by Hackney Carriage Acts.
Right.
Which means the law says
Tonga law.
Tonga law,
Tonga
which
law.
means that every taxi cab in London under the law has to carry enough hay for the horses.
Right.
The difference is that here those laws are used to harass people.
Right. Right. There nobody will stop the guy to say,
No one is, people are unlikely to do that.
Ghas kidhar hai. In fact, they'll laugh at it.
Huh.
They'll laugh. But in fact, we've seen some of those things happen in India because some cop discovers some law.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. I can give you the example of the Indian Aircraft Act,
Right.
which was passed in 1934. And therefore, given the context of that decade, it defines aircraft to include not only the aeroplanes, but also kites and balloons. Kites
Right.
meaning not the
Patang,
birds,
patang.
not the birds, the other
Patang,
kind of kite.
kite.
And balloons.
Ah.
So technically, before flying a balloon, you need a permission. So if the cops descend on you and ask you, where is your license for flying kites? Where is the license for flying balloons? They're strictly within the powers.
But I think we've seen this happen recently in Bombay because in Marine Drive and sort of these beach areas or coastal areas, picnickers tend to light these lamps that go up in the air.
Yeah.
And they've been declared a security threat, and I think action has been taken against the same
That's
law.
right. Under the same law.
Yes.
There are, of course, the other elements which are much more important, as I said earlier, which is old sections in the same, in an old statute. So entire statute doesn't go, the old section has to go. The Transfer of Property Act, that part of it which deals with mortgages is an example of
Right.
that. I can give you examples from many commercial and economic laws, and the often talked about the Indian Penal Code. It's not just section 377. It talks about waging war against an Asiatic power. Now, what on earth is an Asiatic power? Why do we need that today? So there is a cleaning up which has also got to do with old sections in a statute, but that has to systematically.
So how was an Asiatic power defined?
At that time,
Huh.
at that time, no. You see, Macaulay is blamed for all kinds of things,
Right.
but I think we failed to acknowledge his enormous contribution in almost single-handedly drafting the Indian Penal Code.
Right.
So there must have been some notion
In
of
fact,
Asiatic.
Fali Nariman says that he's used English language almost perfectly there.
So I'm sure the Asiatic power then would have referred to Russia.
Right.
I'm not sure whether there's no definition in the statute as such,
Huh.
but there must have been a background which I'm not aware of.
Right. Maybe a friendly government or a friendly state. But even our normal sedition law,
Yes.
it includes attacking a friendly, and not physically attacking, but saying adverse things about a friendly state. I mean, how do you define a friendly state?
Yeah.
So those are finer changes that
Those
need
are
to be-
finer changes which have to be statute by statute, section by section.
So one is this Aircraft Act,
Yeah.
which actually, until it is amended or it was amended, I could be. when
Yes.
I once took my children to IIT campus to show off to them the fact that I can actually get a kite up in air because these skills are being lost now.
yeah.
So a cop could have come and caught.
Yes, absolutely.
कि किससे license लिया है?
Absolute. And you see, look, don't look at it only from your point of view and my point of view. These are things where cops harass the small vendors.
Absolutely.
So all these statutes, they are anti-poor.
The guy who's selling gas
That's
kabubaras.
right. That's correct.
balloons.
That's correct.
But Vivek, tell us something. We all watch Parliament. We all watch Parliament live proceedings. How come we've never noticed that 1,200 laws, half of all of India's laws,
Yes.
have been repealed? I mean, law examinations will change. Teaching of law in India's colleges will change. Law book houses will have their shelves empty out.
Eventually, because this I said is the easy part where you're repealing it in its entirety.
From Bare Act, Bare Acts
yes.
will disappear now.
Yes.
So how does it happen in parliamentary practice so quietly?
Well,
Because I feel fooled as a journalist.
I am somewhat upset that journalists don't write about it.
Huh.
There were actually 4 bills. There were
So
2
aap
bills.
kis marz ki dawa hai? That's the reason I caught hold of you.
there were 2 bills in May 2015.
Right.
And there were 2 bills which had been passed by Lok Sabha. They were pending in Rajya Sabha. They were passed by Rajya Sabha about, I think 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So that's how we
Very
have
early
this.
on, yes.
That's how we
so,
have
so
this.
each legislation has what? Does it repeal many laws?
No. So each bill, you see here you are repealing the entire act.
Right.
So by and large what it does is a single repealing bill. These are the statutes I'm mentioning at one stroke.
So a whole bunch of them.
Whole bunch of them at one go. It's much more difficult when you have to change a section.
Right.
That's much more difficult. Then you have to go statute by statute.
So that is the next.
That is the next step. That is the next step.
So are most laws that needed to be repealed wholesale, fully at the central level been repealed, or some still?
Fully. No, yes. You see, there are some which were central laws, but they were on state subjects. So there are about 240 of those. Those have been referred to the states.
Right.
Otherwise, where you could repeal all of it at one stroke, that's over now.
So will you give us some examples of those that have been referred to the states, which in your view should be repealed?
Let me put it like this. Broadly, if you look at the constitutional nature, most of the laws, most of the things that we economists and you also, despite not being an economist, would call a factor market are things like land and labor.
I'm
several,
happy to bask in your halo.
so several of these are land related. Land in its broad sense. Land is not just ownership of land. So several of these are land related. A few are sort of what might be called labor related. So mostly those. There is, strictly speaking, what should happen is the union government should not legislate in areas that are on the state list. And even if there are areas that are on the concurrent list.
Unless enabling laws are needed.
But governments have not always followed this. So you have a bunch of laws which technically are state government subjects. And to state the obvious, India has over a period of time become too centralized unnecessarily.
In fact, and sometimes this happens in crisis. For example, the NIA, creation of NIA happened in the aftermath of 2008 Bombay attacks. I don't think normally states would have allowed such
one thing just in passing, because it cropped up, people talk about the 7th schedule.
Right.
But they do not realize that the 7th schedule today is not the 7th schedule we got in 1950.
Right, it's been amended many times.
And over a period of time, items have moved from the state list to the concurrent list, and items have moved from the concurrent list to the union list.
Right, so all that has to be done. So what is the action in states? You are now saying that states have started this. Frankly, I latched on to you after I saw a story from Rajasthan that you either repealed 200 odd laws or they are in the process of being repealed.
Rajasthan
because
actually.
you are advising Rajasthan government.
Yeah, well, Rajasthan is quite a story. And the background to that is the only time a state attempted to do something like this was Kerala towards the end of the 1990s. But that was a very limited exercise. Now, one of the problems with starting this exercise in a state is that at the union government level, you have a set of all the statutes in one place. You have the inventory, you have the database. You start with the state government, you don't even know what is the complete set.
Right.
So in Rajasthan, there were almost 50 statutes which we knew existed,
but you couldn't find them.
But no one had copies. No one had copies of those. They had not been used in court cases. The Legislative Assembly did not have copies. Finally, the copies were got from the government printing press. So there was an inventory of about...
I thought maybe US Library of Congress or something.
I doubt it.
You doubt
so
it,
in Rajasthan, there was a total database of about 1250. I'm going to be guarded and careful. I don't want to confuse the issue. But there's always a problem with the numbers. That are you counting the amending act separately? Are you counting the appropriation acts? I'm just being pedantically correct. Having said that, there were 1250. Out of those altogether, about 250 have gone in that first brush, first slicing away, a single 2 repealed bills, which is the ones that can be just eliminated at one stroke. We have now moved on to the next step.
1/5 of all laws have more or less gone.
1/5, yes, roughly. 15%, 16%.
And do you remember any remarkable ones out of these?
These were the easy ones.
No, but any interesting ones out of these? Like your locust law and your balloon law?
No, offhand I don't remember, because the more interesting ones will come in the next exercise.
Such as which?
Which is when we are going to rationalize, we are going to harmonize. In higher education, do I need 65 different statutes? I have
in higher education?
In higher education
state?
alone, in the state, I have 65 different statutes for higher education alone.